Welcome to Excel and Business Math video 28. Hey, in this video, we got to talk about the amazing if function, the is functions, and how to build a checkbook register. Now, here are our topics. We're going to see all sorts of amazing Excel features, double borders, data validation, conditional formatting. We'll see how to create a checkbook balance formula, and we'll learn about is functions, the amazing if function, and even look at ISFORMULA and formula text. Now, here's the checkbook register we're going to build. We're going to have this magic formula over here in this column, and we're going to see these amazing if functions. In fact, a lot of what we're going to learn in this video is how to use if to put one of two things into a cell. And we'll get to see the famous double quote, which is how we get a formula to show nothing in a cell. Now we're going to start off by going over to the sheet EX1. Now here are all the goals that we're going to see for our two examples on this sheet. I'm going to zoom in. All right, so we have the start of a checkbook register. We're always going to enter the checkbook number here or the electronic number or whatever the reference number might be. We're going to enter a date always in this column. Who the check is issued to or some description. This is the amount of the withdrawal. We're going to have a column for reconciling, just like we saw last video. Here's the amount of the deposit, and this is where we need our balance formula. Now, before we can get busy creating our formula and learning about the if function, I want to do three things. I want to add some borders, so I want to add black lines everywhere. But to help emphasize the difference between each column, I want to double border vertically. Now, this is easy enough. We saw this back in video number 7 when we did formatting. Now I'm going to highlight the entire range all the way down to the last cell down here. We're going to use our keyboard Control-1. We're going to go in the Format Cells dialog box over to the Border tab. And this is the way borders work. You have to select the line first. Then you draw it over here. You can either click. If you click in the wrong place, click again. Or you can use the buttons up here like None. Now, outline, we'll put an outline just around the outside. And if I click inside, it'll put all vertical and all horizontal lines. We can see our picture drawn right here. Now, I want a different line. So I go back and select my line. And now I can click. And what I want to click is on the vertical line. Remember, if you accidentally click in the wrong place, click a second time. I want to click. And that's it. Single dark lines everywhere except for vertical on the inside. When I click OK and click off to the side, that is looking good. Now our second task is like we saw last video. I want to add an X drop-down list. So I can select from this, select the X, which will mean that record's been reconciled with our bank statement. Now again, data validation drop-down list that we saw last video. It's not required. I'm not going to test you. But it is an amazing, useful trick in Excel. And it's perfect for a checkbook register. All right, so I highlight the column. I go up to Data. I want to click in the Data Tools on the Data Validation button. I click on that. Now, data validation is great because I can validate what kind of data goes into the cell. I don't want to allow any value. I want to allow from a list. Just like last video, we come down to source. Usually you have a list of items, or even more usually you select a column with your items. But we just want one item, so I type capital X. Now when I click OK, in cell dropdown will appear, and there, dropdown X. Now this is important because now, as we saw last video, if I type anything here that's not an X, it will not let me. I am validating what goes into that column. So I'm going to put my X there. And it's important that we validate because now we're going to add conditional formatting. When I reconcile and put an X in this column here, I want the whole row to turn yellow. Now, the way we do that is with a logical formula using mixed cell references. We saw in great detail how to do this last video in the cells. Now, for this video, if you download the PDFs, I actually have notes and pictures in a written form for each step in adding conditional formatting. Now, here's what we do. We very carefully select the first cell and select all the way to the last cell. I'm noticing that the active cell is in the upper left-hand corner. Now I'm going to go to the Home ribbon tab, over to Styles, Conditional Formatting drop-down, and I want New Rule. Now, I don't want any of these. I want the last one. So I click on Use a Formula to determine which cells to format. Now I click Format Cells where this formula is true. Now, there's no formula there, but we're going to create the formula. Now, last video, we did it in the cells and then copied and pasted it here. But I'm going to create this right in the dialog box. Now, whatever formula I create here will, in memory, be put behind the scenes into the cell and copied down and over. And it's a logical formula that will deliver true or false. Now, the formatting only gets applied when our formula comes out true. So what is it about this row that has to be true? Well, the reconciling cell has to have an X. So watch this. I'm going to click for the very first row, same one with the active cell. I'm going to click on that cell. That's an absolute cell reference, and that's not what I want. So I hit the F4 key once and twice. The dollar sign is locking the E column. So in memory, as the formula is copied over, meaning E17, it'll be E17 for every single cell as it copies over. But the 17 does not have a dollar sign. So when the formula gets copied down, it will go to E18. All right, so now I have to ask the question of that cell. Are you equal to, and then in double quotes, text always has to be in double quotes in an Excel formula, capital X and double quote. Now, by the way, Excel and Access and some computer programs like those are not case sensitive. Little x or big X will qualify as being equal to an X. Now, that is a logical formula. We used a comparative operator, right? So it'll come out true or false. Now we have to specify what formatting we want applied to each cell when it comes out true. So I click Format. I'm just going to add yellow. You can add any formatting you want from any one of the tabs. Click OK. Click OK. And that is amazing. Now when I come here and from Data Validation dropdown, select an X, instantly conditional formatting highlights with yellow the entire row. All right, we did our borders. We did our data validation with an X. We did our conditional formatting to highlight the whole row. Now we need to create our formula. Now I'm going to delete these just for the moment using the delete key. That is so cool. Now, our formula for a balance. Well, our goal for the whole column is to have the balance automatically calculated regardless of whether we make a withdrawal or we're adding. Not only that, but when we get down here, there's nothing entered. So I do not want the formula. Now let's just start off with the basics and see if we can try and build our way into this. Well, of course, that cell right there, equal sign, needs to look at the balance above as a relative cell reference. And because this transaction was a withdrawal, we need to subtract. So I'm going to subtract relative cell reference, 1, 2, 3 cells to the left. Control Enter. Now, when I copy it down, go to the last cell and hit F2, well, that formula will work for subtraction, but it's definitely not working for an addition. So here I'm going to recreate the formula. Equals, I still need to look at the balance from above, relative cell reference, but now I need to add from the amount of deposit column and enter. But when I copy that down, well, F2, that's not going to work. Now let's delete all this with the delete key and think about the logic of this column. Every single cell is always going to need to look at the balance above. But when we have a withdrawal, we're going to have nothing in this cell. So it would be perfectly OK to add that empty cell because it will be like adding 0. When we get down here, if we had a formula that looked one cell above at the balance, subtracted nothing from this cell and added the amount of the deposit, that formula will work. So that's the formula we're going to create. Equals, as a relative cell reference, one cell above plus relative cell reference, the amount of deposit cell for this row, minus the withdrawal, 1, 2, 3 cells to the left. And that formula will work. And the trick is, the orange one, if it's 0, no problem. When it gets down here, it will add. The lavender purple one, when it's a number, it will subtract. When it gets down here, it'll just subtract 0. Control Enter. And now I'm going to copy it all the way down. I'm going to go to the last cell and hit F2. That is working. Look at that. Always adding from above, adding from the amount deposit, and subtracting the withdrawal. Now, down here, I do not want any of these formulas. We could manually do this, delete, and every time we add a transaction, come over and copy it down. But I don't want to do that. I want it to automatically populate with a formula as soon as I put a date here. But if there's no date, like there is for all of these cells, I do not want the formula. I want to show nothing in the cell. I only want the formula to show up and calculate when I enter a date. Well, that means if the date and whether or not the cell contains a date is going to determine whether our balance formula is in the cell, there better be a function in Excel that can tell us when a cell contains a date and when it doesn't contain a date. Now we have to go all the way back to video number 4, where we talked about data types. Remember, dates, numbers, time, those are all considered numbers in Excel. This is text. These are numbers. This is an empty cell. So guess what? There is a function that can check whether what you've entered in this cell is a number. And guess what? They named it really smartly. They named it ISNUMBER. Now I'm going to backspace because there's lots of different is functions. You can use ISBLANK, which checks whether a cell is empty. If it's empty, it reports true. If it's not empty, it reports false. ISFORMULA, that will report true when it's a formula or false when it's not. ISNUMBER, that reports a true when it sees a number. If it's not a number, it reports false. So I'm going to type ISNUMBER tab. Now, all of the is functions simply take a single item like a cell reference. As soon as we're looking at this relative cell reference, we can copy this down the column, and the column will be filled with trues and falses, telling us when it finds a number. In our case, a date. Control Enter. And now I'm going to copy it down. And watch this. We have a complete pattern of trues and falses. If I go to the last cell and hit F2, sure enough, that is looking at a cell. That's an empty cell. But guess what? It's not a number. So what does ISNUMBER deliver? False. Right here, F2, that is looking at a number. So it reports, when I hit Enter, true. And watch this right over here. This is what I need for us to have a magic balance formula. Right here, I'm going to put the date 6/13/2017. Watch what happens when I hit Enter right there. When I hit Enter, now it says true. Now, guess what? We have a trigger. True, I want the formula in the cell. False, I do not want the formula in the cell. Now, we have to learn not just about the is functions, ISNUMBER, ISBLANK, and so on, but now we have to learn about the if function. And escape. Off to the side, I'm just going to type $if, and I'm going to hit Tab. And there are 1, 2, 3 different arguments in the if function. The first argument is the logical test. That's something that delivers a true or false. And guess what? We're going to put ISNUMBER right into the logical test. Then the if will have a true or false as we copy the formula down, comma. Then the rest of if is easy. We simply put what we want in the cell if the logical test comes out true. For us, it will be the formula, because remember, true means we want the formula, comma. The third argument is value if false. That's what do you want to put in the cell if the logical test, like down here, comes out false. And guess what? We're going to learn the secret syntax in a formula that says show nothing. All right, I'm going to click Escape, highlight this whole column right here, delete, and now we're going to start at the top. Equals IF tab, logical test. We need to put something in this argument that comes out true or false. So I'm using ISNUMBER. Notice we're nesting two functions, one inside the other, but that's perfect because ISNUMBER, when I click on the relative cell reference for the date, close parentheses. Now, the if function, logical test argument, is using ISNUMBER. ISNUMBER, as we saw over here, will deliver true and false to the if function. Now we come to the end, comma, value if true. Well, we want our formula, and our formula is always look one cell above plus one cell to my left. That's the amount of the deposit for this row minus our withdrawal, 1, 2, 3 cells to the left. Now notice we actually created a whole separate formula in the value if true. But when logical test ISNUMBER comes out true, if will now have something to put in the cell. That'll be our formula. Now we come to the end, comma. We need to tell the if function what to put in the cell if the logical test comes out false. And what we put in to show nothing is double quote, double quote. Do not type single apostrophes like this. Notice that was 2 single apostrophes, then 2 more single apostrophes. That will not work. That's not the secret syntax for show nothing, backspace. It is double quote, double quote. It's the key right to the left of the Enter key. Now, what is that? That's actually has a special name called a zero-length text string. Anytime you have text in a formula, you have to put it in double quotes. But when you put 2 double quotes and nothing in between the double quotes, that's how you get a formula to show nothing. Close parentheses. Now, before we copy this down, logical test, that's something that comes out true or false. Value of true, that's what if will put in the cell. When ISNUMBER comes out true, there's what it'll put in the cell if it comes out false. Control Enter. Copy it down. That is absolutely amazing. Be sure to go to the last cell and hit F2. Look at all of the cell reference. Absolutely perfect. Now let's test it and watch this magic in action. I'm going to type 6/13/2017. Right when I hit Enter, watch what happens there. Enter. It shows up just like magic. When I delete both of these, they go away just like magic. Now let's look closer. F2, what happened here? Logical test, we know that that came out false. So what did it do? If put that double quote into the cell so it could show nothing. Watch this. Now when I come over and put the date 6/13/2017, as soon as I hit Enter, now it's totally different. F2, the whole formula recalculates each time. ISNUMBER's coming out true. So now the if function puts that formula in the cell. That is the power of the if function. Now I'm going to enter this Control Enter, and with that cell selected, I want to go up to the Formula Ribbon tab. And we've seen this before over in Formula Auditing. We can click Evaluate Formula. Now, Evaluate Formula will show us step by step how Excel calculates this formula. Now I'm going to either click Evaluate or hit the Enter key. Notice the first thing it has to look at is what's in cell B31. So I'm going to hit Enter. It's looking at the underlying number. Of course, that's what dates are. Enter. ISNUMBER comes out true, so it immediately jumps to the value if true argument and steps through the formula one cell at a time. Enter, 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 and it calculates the balance. Enter. So when I hit Enter, The if function shows the answer 3326.77. Now I'm going to close this or click Escape. And now let's get rid of this. Delete. And now with that same cell selected, let's go run our evaluate formula. Now when I hit Enter, Enter, ISNUMBER delivers a false. So now it's going to evaluate the whole thing, putting that little double quote, into the cell. Now, we can't see that double quote. At the end of this video, when we do our last if function, I will actually show you a way to prove that double quote is actually sitting in the cell. But for us, what did we see? I'm going to Control Z. But for us, what did we see? Fundamentally, what does this if function do? All its job is to put one of two things in a cell based on a logical test. Now, I want to go look at this basic same example, but we're going to look at a different way of approaching the same problem. Now, down here, this is a different check register, and we want to do the same thing. But our example we did just a second ago, we used ISNUMBER. But that's not the only way we could have done this. Watch this. If I type ISBLANK checks whether a cell is empty. So watch what happens to the pattern of trues and falses. Close parentheses, Control, Enter. Well, now it's false as I copy down. Well, of course, down at the bottom, F2, now ISBLANK is delivering a true. Because what's in the cell? It's an empty cell. Right here, F2 ISBLANK. It's looking at that cell. It sees something there. It's not an empty cell. So it says, is it empty? False. Now, if we were to use ISBLANK inside of if, that means when ISBLANK delivers a false, the if function will need to put the formula in. Down here, when ISBLANK delivers a true, meaning there's no date there, then we're going to have to deliver double quote to the cell. So here's how this works. Equals if our logical test ISBLANK. I'm going to click relative cell reference on the date column, close parentheses, comma. What is the value if true? It has to be if ISBLANK comes out true, double quote. We can see our patterns of trues and falses because we were smart and did it off the side to help us learn. Notice down here, true. So that's why double quote is in the value if true, comma. That means that the value of false, that's our formula. So I click relative cell reference 1 above plus the amount of the deposit minus the amount of whatever the withdrawal is or reduction. That's our formula. Close parentheses. Notice, logical test, because we used ISBLANK, the two items, one of two things we're putting in the cell, they are reversed. ISBLANK comes out true, we want double quote. When it comes out false, like it's going to do right here, then we put our formula. Control, Enter, and copy the formula down. That is beautiful. Now we can test it. We're going to come over here, 9/5/2017. As soon as I hit Enter, watch what happens. Enter. That is amazing. Now, this is a checkbook register, but all sorts of Excel templates that you build, like tracking inventory. Anytime you buy some new inventory, you enter a number here. Anytime you sell some, you enter it here. You'd want the same type of formula, where as soon as we enter a date for either purchase the inventory or sell some inventory, we want the formula to show up. All right, so we saw the if function ISBLANK and double quote to show nothing. And up here we saw F2, if ISNUMBER, and a double quote to show nothing. Both formulas are perfectly OK. If and ISNUMBER makes more sense to you, then use that one. If the if and the ISBLANK makes more sense to you, then use that one. However, there is a difference. Notice ISNUMBER is checking to see if there is a number. Watch what happens when I accidentally type the wrong type of date. And we talked about this back in video number 4 when we talked about data types. If I accidentally type 66 instead of 6/13/2017 and enter, notice that's not a number. So the formula doesn't show up. Down here, notice we are checking to see if the cell is blank. So if I come over here and accidentally enter a wrong type of date, well, it shows up because the cell isn't empty. So there is a subtle difference. But in terms of building a template for a check register in this class, you can use either method. Now, I do want to show you one last example of the if function and is formulas. Now, here's what we were talking about last week. We were talking about percentage increases and decreases. Here's the stock value at the beginning of the day. Here's the stock at the end of the day. And I want to create 3 different formulas, the change part, the rate of change, and the rate. But over here, I want a formula that will automatically show me the formula as soon as I enter the formula in the cell. Now, we've already seen equals formula text. We talked about this earlier in the class. If I enter that and click on a cell, close parentheses, well, it gives me an NA because the cell doesn't have a formula. But as soon as I type a formula like end minus begin to calculate the change or the amount of change, look at that. It comes up as a formula considered text. But what I'd really like is I'd like that to show up when I enter a formula. Otherwise, show me nothing. All right, so you ready? We can do that. What are we doing, though, for this whole column? We're putting one of 2 things. We're either putting F2 formula text, or I need to show nothing using double quote, double quote. So anytime we have 2 things that go into a cell, the perfect job for that is the if function, equals if. Ooh, our logical test. We need to check whether a relative cell reference is a formula. Luckily, there's is formula. All it does is it checks the contents of the cell, and it'll deliver true when it sees a formula, false if it doesn't. Here, of course, that will be false, comma. Well, value of true, what do I want to put in the cell if is formula says true? I found a formula. We want formula text, tab. Now we click on relative cell reference, close parentheses, comma. Now we need to tell the if function, what do we want to put in the cell if it comes out false, meaning is formula? I want to show nothing, double quote, double quote. Now, there is a 0-length text string in the cell. Text string is the fancy word to mean text. Now, close parentheses, Control-Enter. Let's copy it down. Now, let's do the rest of our formulas. Percentage change equals, well, there's the amount of the change divided by, we always compare the amount of the change to where we began. And that will tell us the percentage change or our rate of change. As soon as I hit Enter, there it is. Now, we want the rate. That's going to be equals 1 plus the rate of change. As soon as I hit Enter, watch what happens over here. Now, just to prove to you that that formula right there, remember, it came out false, so it actually put that in the cell. Enter. Right down here, F2, this came out true, so it put formula text in the cell. Let's try our is blank equals is blank. And now I'm going to click on a truly empty cell because that's what is blank does. It gives true when the cell is empty. Close parentheses, Control-Enter, true. Now notice that was a relative cell reference, so I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it right here. Oh, what? That cell looks blank to me. F2, let's make sure I got the right function. Is blank, you got it. That cell is not empty. It's actually double quote, double quote. It's actually considered text. One other thing, not necessary for this class, or actually 2 other things. You want to prove to yourself further? Excel can do anything. Is it text? Yes, that's a function. I can check to see if that cell contains text. Oh, look at that. True. Not only that, but I could take this one step further. Remember, we called this funny little thing the syntax for having a formula show nothing. Remember, we called it a zero-length text string? Well, actually, there is a function called len, and it returns the number of characters in a text string. So I could ask, how many characters are there? 0. If I were to copy this down, of course, right here, it reports 5 because it found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there we go. That if function is the perfect thing to use when you want to put one or two things into a cell. And actually, next week during payroll, we'll have to use the if function to check whether someone got overtime or not. Did they work more than 40 hours? True or false? All right, so we saw the if function here to either show the formula text or please show me nothing. Back over on our example 1 sheet, we saw F2, if ISNUMBER to put either the formula or show nothing in a column for our checkbook register. Down here, we chose a slightly different logical test, choosing ISBLANK instead, but still doing the same thing that if does so well, putting one of two things in a cell. All right, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and sub, because there's always lots more videos to come from Excel is Fun, including next week. We'll start with video 29, and we'll have some pretty cool videos about payroll and how Excel can make our job easy. All right, we'll see you next video.